All right, so this is looking east down the Midway Plaisance. You can see the Obama Center sticking up there at the very end of the Midway, originally designed to connect both the east side of South Park to the west side of South Park. Julia, did I get that right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so Julia, you are a historian for a lot of work here in Chicago, and you did stuff for the Park District as well. Explain a little bit of that again real quick.
Right, exactly. I am a Chicago historian, and I was the historian and preservationist for the Chicago Park District for over 25 years. And now I'm self-employed and working on all kinds of fun projects.
But you know a thing or two about this park, Jackson Park, the Midway Plaisance, Washington Park. What was it all called though at one time years ago?
So the original plan, it was called South Park, and it was 1,055 acres.
Wow.
So it had the Western Division, the Eastern Division, and then the Midway Plaisance. The famous landscape architect, Frederick Law Olmsted, who designed the whole plan, came up with the name Midway Plaisance.
And was this originally supposed to have water? Was this supposed to be a canal?
Right, exactly. So it was never fully executed, but there's beautiful plans that you can look at. And they did actually start digging a couple feet down, hoping that the project would progress the following year, and it never did. And so the idea, if you look at his plan, is that there's sort of these circle spaces that were meant to be the
and that's this.
turning basins. Well, it's not really this.
Not officially yet, but this is the idea though, where they would turn around though.
Exactly. This is a newer garden. It's actually a garden dedicated to Allison Davis, who was one of the first African American academics at the University of Chicago, a really very talented professor, author, sociologist, I think. He did really important work, and it was meant to be symbolic because Chicago had these like invisible race lines, and so he kind of broke through those barriers to become an academic at the university. And in Chicago, you know, certainly by the teens in the 20s, the neighborhood where Washington Park was located was becoming more of an African American neighborhood, so that this symbolically, the garden was put here. This is more than you really want.
That's okay.
So it's a newer garden, and it is meant to honor an important figure who's associated with the university and really the history of education, and that education needs to be fair for all students of all backgrounds and races. That was kind of his thing. And so his family donated it, and they wanted it also to be sort of symbolic of the kind of history of the site. And so this circle shows where the turning basin would have been if Olmsted's canal had been completed. And it would have actually gone
a little further.
Yeah, this is where you could turn your boat around, but if you continued on, it would have linked with what they called the mirror, another French term, the lagoon in Washington Park. So you would have this whole boating experience from Lake Michigan through the lagoons of Jackson Park, all the way up to the canal, the historic canal that never existed, and then it would have continued on to the Washington Park Lagoon. That was his vision.
And it would have been beautiful, and it still is beautiful. I mean, the Plaisance is just this beautiful park space now, and at one time, though, you mentioned they started to dig down. That's why, if you look out, it's kind of hard to tell now from back here, but that's why if the entire Plaisance kind of goes down a little bit, because they actually did start to dig. They just kind of ran out of money.
They dug, several feet deep, and there was a lot of sort of politics involved.
As there always is, sure.
And so, but for years, this was the premier ice skating spot of Chicago. And there's great ice skating photographs because they would flood that dip, and it's such a large space. So must have been really fun. I mean, especially in the 20s, I think all the university students would come out and go ice skating.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because speaking of ice skating rink, they still do ice skating right here on the Plaisance, except in the last few years when they built the ice skating rink that is there today, they found something that, of course, ties back to the World's Fair.
In the early 2000s, the Chicago Park District started actually building, refrigerated ice skating rinks, which many of us still enjoy today. Yeah. One of them is here on the Midway, and as you were intimating, when they started digging to create the foundation, they actually found the foundation for the Ferris wheel. because during the 1893 World's Fair, the Midway Plaisance was a really interesting kind of linear experience that included a lot of the rides, and you know, a lot of people know the term Midway from a carnival. That is based on this. This wasn't based on that.
Ah, so this was first.
This was first, and you know, to be quite frank, some of the attractions that they had would not be considered appropriate at all today. They would have, you know, people from other cultures, from Africa, come, and they'd have an exhibit, and it would almost be as though they were like human beings in a zoo. And there was a famous anthropologist who felt that that was a important scholarly thing to do. And of course, by today's standards, we were pretty horrified by that.
Yeah, sure.
So there were these little villages, you know, some of them were, you know, maybe like a little Swiss village and that kind of thing. But there were also these wonderful rides, and the Ferris wheel was kind of the icon of the fair. The World's Fair that had preceded ours was the 1889 fair in Paris, and they had the Eiffel Tower.
Yep.
So our, you know, Burnham and the team of architects and engineers, they had to figure out something that could outdo the Eiffel Tower.
And they did, but too bad they couldn't figure out a way to keep it going. I mean, I know it went up to Lakeview, and then it went to St. Louis, and then it was for scrap metal, right? That's kind of what ended up happening to it?
I think so, but it did influence a lot of other Ferris wheels.
Sure it did. Even Navy Piers or the London Eye or many others around the world.
Yeah, this was really the very first, they invented it. And George Ferris, it was named after him. But if you want to have a sense of exactly where it was, you can come to the Midway. If you want to come in the winter, bring your ice skates and look for the skating rink. You'll see it. It's right in the middle of the Midway. And it's hard for us to envision the size because it was about 260 feet tall.
Thank goodness.
And I believe there were 36 cars, and each car could hold 60 people.
My goodness. And I imagine, I don't know for sure the Obama Center height, but I would be willing to bet that the Ferris wheel and the height of the Obama Center, pretty similar.
I think the Ferris wheel would have been taller.
A little taller, but it gives you a scope that we are probably almost a mile away.
Well, that's a good...
And you can see the Obama Center. So dead center would have been where the Ferris wheel would have been.
That's a good point. And there's a famous story about this guy started freaking out. Did you ever? This is from a wonderful book called The City of the Century. And there was an anecdote in there that people were riding on the Ferris wheel, and some man started having a panic attack. and there's 60 people in your car. You don't want this guy, and they're open.
Oh Lord.
And so the guy's having a panic attack, and everybody's trying to calm him down. So this woman takes her skirt off. I'm sure she still had like a petticoat on, and puts it over his head to calm him down.
Well, that's a great story.
Yeah.
We'll leave it there.
I mean, you imagine somebody on the top, they've never been to a height like that.
No, and it was high. It was probably windy like today, and you saw Lake Michigan, you saw downtown, you saw the north side.
And it's going so slowly.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. You mentioned this circle area of the turnaround. There used to be one on the on the east end of the park, but because of the Obama Center, that has been removed to make room for that.
Yes, that was, you know, this one, I'm not sure if there ever was a circle on this end, because I didn't see one if there was. So I don't know that when they were digging that they actually carried all this way. But they did at the east end, they were digging the circle that was meant to be on the east end. And so it was this depressed lawn. And then in the 1930s, when the park got money from the WPA, they thought, let's just make this into a garden. And it was actually designed by a woman, which was kind of cool. And so it was this really beautiful perennial garden. But it's gone now. I've heard there's going to be sort of a new garden that is sort of uses some of the kinds of plants, but I don't think it's going to look the same. We don't know yet.
But there'll be a garden either way.
Yeah.
And on the very west end of the Midway Plaisance, you have the Fountain of Time, which I just love. I think it's one of my most favorite sculptures in the city. Laredo Taft had a studio right along the Plaisance here in the Woodlawn neighborhood.
And he lived nearby, so he could walk to work.
Ah.
He lived nearby. He raised his family in a nice old house in Woodlawn. And yes, he was affiliated with the university, and he's also affiliated with the University of Illinois. He was Chicago's kind of premier sculptor. And So there was a man, Benjamin Franklin Ferguson, who left a big part of his fortune to have perpetual outdoor art in Chicago, the Ferguson Fund. And so that is the fund that actually paid for the Fountain of Time. And the piece is made out of exposed aggregate concrete. And so it's really interesting. It's got 100 figures, 100 human figures with this kind of scraggy, kind of, sort of scary figure of Father Time or the Reaper, however you want to interpret it, watching as humanity sort of struggles forward. And it was inspired by a poem by an English poet, Henry Austin Dobson, that has a repeating couplet, and it says, "Time goes, you say, ah no, alas, time stays, we go." And so at the very end, at one end it's very youthful and you see a lot of babies, and at the other end there's a lot of old people that have kind of almost that like the scream kind of expression on their face as they're kind of getting ready to pass away. But it was a challenging project for Laredo Taft. It was created in the 1920s, and it was basically considered a new material. He was trying to explore what should he make this sculpture from. Marble would have been too expensive, and honestly, we would have never been able to preserve marble because in Chicago's climate, it would be problematic.
Sure.
And then bronze was I think he felt that bronze would be too kind of like harsh. So he was starting to explore more modern options, and so he decided to use this type of concrete, exposed aggregate concrete. There was a Washington, a kind of a federal office that kind of helped people when they were developing construction projects, and so there was a man named Joseph Early who had kind of helped develop this technique. And so instead of making it out of a really like a solid material, it was kind of poured in place pieces, and so it's hollow on the inside.
Oh,
and the problem with that was that they really thought it would hold up better in Chicago, and we have buildings made out of this kind of material. It's kind of, Baha'i Temple is kind of similar. But we do have this freeze-thaw cycle. So it has been a challenge for the Chicago Park District to preserve and to maintain. And so there have been a number of projects where it's had to be restored. And I was involved with one where part of my role was to try to identify funds for these kinds of projects. So I wrote a Save America's Treasures grant, and that allowed for the restoration of the basin itself. It was always meant to be a reflecting basin.
Yeah, when we walked up here, it's the first time that I have ever seen water in it in my life. So every time I come, either to doing restoration or they just never filled it, but there's water in it now. And people can also find little hidden gems with the characters that are part of the Time Marches On. You mentioned a couple of them.
Right, exactly. Well, Laredo Taft, as you know, his studio was right down the street. He had all of these students working for him, and so he used some of his students as models for the 100 figures. He also used his 3 daughters, and so when you're looking at the piece, the 3 daughters are all kind of under one cloak. Kind of under the horseback rider. So I always like thinking about that. One of them went on to marry Paul Douglas, this progressive senator in Illinois.
Wow.
And a portion of the wooded island was named after him because he was wanted to preserve natural areas. So they named the part of the wooded island after him. And then if you walk around to the back of the Fountain of Time, you can actually see the sculptor himself. He has a
little hidden gems.
Self-portrait. And what I like to say, I mean, there's a little plaque so you can find it on the ground, but what I like to say is, well, most of them are wearing these long togas. He's wearing an artist's smock that only comes to his knee. So you can immediately kind of see which person is wearing more of a smock than a toga. Right behind him is a man carrying this huge bag. And so Taft had a lot of important sculptural projects across the state and across the country. And so when he would go to a stone quarry, he had his sort of top stone person who worked with him in his studio, kind of his quarry guy,
Yeah.
to like go and find the choice stone in the quarry. And so that's sort of the person he had sort of the closest was his sort of right-hand man.
I believe we call those interns nowadays.
Exactly. Well, hopefully he got paid better than an intern, but I don't know. I think he was like an Italian immigrant. So it's kind of fun to think about that the people in your life end up being, part of this.
How long has this statue been here?
It's from the 1920s.
1920s, and it's a wonderful thing to see. Julia, if people want to know a little bit about what you do, what's the best way for them to find information about you and your books and all that stuff?
I have a website, and it's jbackrack.com.
Julia Backrack.
Bachrach.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
is
too.
the Midway Plaisance right here on the border of Woodlawn in Hyde Park. Julia, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. This was really fun.